Hello everyone, my name is Megan Thomas and I use she, her, hers pronouns. Thank you to everyone who watched my first video. I was absolutely blown away by all the positive responses. If this is your first time watching my videos, I'm going to go ahead and apologize to you now, especially if you're here for a pure makeup tutorial. That's because I am not a makeup artist. However, I am a very heavy makeup enthusiast. But most importantly, I am an advocate for all those who have experienced or are currently experiencing domestic violence at home. I am also an attorney licensed to practice in Massachusetts, and I'm using these videos to exercise my privilege as an attorney to share information in a discreet way in hopes of empowering all those going through it right now. At this point, a lot of us realize that the shutdowns required for COVID-19 recovery has actually resulted in a very horrendous spike of domestic violence incidences. If you are experiencing or have ever experienced violence in your lifetime, I'm sorry, but I'm here for you, and I hope this information helps to empower you. This should go without saying, but Black Lives Matter. We will not be free until we all are free. And this saying rings true, especially now as we celebrate Juneteenth 2020. I dedicate this episode to all Black LGBTQ plus people around the world, especially our Black trans community members. Your lives matter. I'm sorry that you don't hear that enough from the cis community or from the rest of the world, really. But as a cis straight person, I hope to do more in my capacity, whatever capacity I can, to transform our society so that we can all live free as we're supposed to. So today's video is going to be about power and control. All abusive relationships spin on the axis of power and control. What does that mean? Really, it means abusers will do whatever they can to drain the power from their victims. When abusers see that their power is slipping away from them, they begin to act forcefully and even recklessly. That underlying struggle for power that the abuser and the victim are going through is the energy that keeps the cycle of abuse working. In my last video, I gave a brief synopsis of the cycle of violence theory. So if you're interested in that, and I do highly recommend it, I would suggest you check that out and let me know what you think after you've seen it. Some relationships follow a pattern of essentially a honeymoon phase where everything is fine, a tension phase where things are clearly becoming not okay, and then the explosion period where things are clearly not okay, which is where you usually see the more extreme violence and manipulation from the abuser. The abuser's reach for power is what's causing this cycle to keep turning. So even though it is true that 45% of relationships follow a cyclical pattern, it doesn't take away from the fact that each relationship and each situation is unique. And the ways in which someone is affected by this vicious push for power really varies based on their own personal identities. My goal for this video is to discuss this very point by discussing a variety of what I'm going to call, or really what's just universally called, the power and control wheels. You know, I love me a good illustration. I have a few different wheels that I'm going to leave links to in my bio underneath all of the makeup details, including the original power and control wheel, which is gendered for female victims. I have a gender-neutral power and control wheel. I also have a wheel for immigrants, for teenagers, for low-income individuals, elderly individuals. But because it's Pride Month, and because the trans community needs our help now more than ever to protect their rights, I am going to focus on the LGBTQ plus relationship power and control wheel. The link to this wheel is in the bio, and I highly encourage you all to open that wheel up and follow along as I talk. Or you can just watch me blend out all these different layers of foundation and concealer over and over again, whatever you choose. But first, some statistics concerning violence in the LGBTQ community. First of all, 43.8% of lesbian women and 61.1% of bisexual women have experienced rape, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner at some point in their life. And this compared to 35% of heterosexual women. 26% of gay men and 37.3% of bisexual men have experienced rape, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime, in comparison to 29% of heterosexual men. In a study of male same-sex relationships, only 26% of men called the police for assistance after experiencing near-lethal violence. Transgender victims are more likely to experience intimate partner violence in public compared to those who do not identify as transgender. LGBTQ, Black, and African American victims are more likely to experience physical intimate partner violence compared to those who do not identify as Black or African American. LGBTQ white victims are more likely to experience sexual violence compared to those who do not identify as white. All this to say that there is a clear access to justice issue for members of the LGBTQ plus community, and we can do a lot better. Now, looking at the wheel, you'll see that there are two outer layers, one with a black background, one with the white background. The one in the black background, I like to think of these as the mindsets that exist in society that give the abuser power over their victims if they identify with the LGBTQ plus community initially. So that's homophobia, transphobia, biphobia, heterosexism. These are all things that are in society that enforces or perpetuates violence against the LGBTQ plus community. Then you have the white background outer circle, which is the violence, essentially. Sexual violence, pushing, shoving, hair pulling, especially if you're wearing wigs or hair extensions, just grabbing, general physical violence that is recognizable from the get-go. Then you have the stuff that's in the center, kind of sliced up like a pizza pie. And these are the various methods or avenues for physical or manipulative violence that the abuser can use against their victim. If you look at the other wheels, you can quickly click over to the other ones just for a comparison. You'll see that some of the actions that are described in this wheel, you'll also find in other wheels. So let's just get into it then. At the very center, you have power and control. This is the thing that keeps it spinning. This is what keeps the relationship together. Outside of it, you'll see different actions as explained a little bit before, starting with using coercion and threats. What does that mean? Making or carrying out threats to do something to harm you, threatening to leave or commit suicide, driving recklessly to frighten you, threatening to out you, threatening others who are important to you, and stalking. The big one here that I do not want to gloss over is threatening to out you. We can all only imagine as straight individuals what that means to be outed when you are not yet out. Unfortunately, we do not yet live in a world where members of the LGBTQ community are readily accepted even by their parents. So we already know that alienating a victim is one way that abusers always tend to try to keep the relationship going. But this is a very specific way to alienate someone, because once someone is outed, they may not know how their family's going to react. They may not know how their friends are going to react, how their employers are going to react, and abusers definitely know how dangerous it is. Next, we have using intimidation. And what does that look like? making you afraid by using looks, gestures, actions, by smashing things, abusing pets, displaying weapons, using looks, actions, gestures to reinforce homophobic, biphobic, or transphobic control. I believe I mentioned in the last video that in a survey with female victims of domestic violence, a lot of them mentioned that they were able to anticipate violence during the tension period just by looking at their partner's facial expressions. So I'm sure for the most part, abusers are very well aware of how their faces and their body is used to scare their victim. The next one is emotional abuse. And before I read any of the things that are detailed in this little section, I just want to say that emotional violence is still violence, even though it's not, a physical hand to the face or a grab. It's still jarring in the same way. And I think the world is better off realizing this and referring to emotional abuse as actual violence. And what does emotional abuse look like? That's putting you down, making you feel bad about yourself, humiliating you, questioning if you were a real lesbian, a real man, a real woman, a real femme, a real butch, etc. And again, reinforcing internalized homophobia, biphobia, or transphobia. It is definitely a dangerous place to be in when you feel like you can no longer trust yourself. If your abuser is spending all of his time breaking down your self-esteem, making you question yourself, then you can easily imagine how one ends up staying in such a relationship and how they end up feeling trapped. The next one here is using isolation. And I already briefly mentioned about how threatening to out somebody can be a way to isolate them. But aside from that, just physical isolation, not letting you go anywhere, controlling what you do, who you see, who you talk to. This is a perfect way for the abuser to remain in control of your life. If you have no one else to go to, then again, you can easily see how one can feel trapped in their situation. Denying, minimizing, and blaming. This is a big one for me because I feel like there are no abusive relationships where this is absent. And what does that look like? It's making light of the abuse. When they say things like, it wasn't that bad, it wasn't that big of a deal, it was just a play slap or something like that, when in reality they full on punched you, or they said something so deeply horrible about you that it could never be a joke. But once you start absorbing all of this language from the abuser, again, you start to lose faith in yourself. And having faith in yourself is the ultimate power, really. Other examples include shifting responsibility for abusive behavior, saying it's your fault, you deserved it, accusing you of mutual abuse, saying women can't abuse women, men can't abuse men, things like that. Using children is also another big one for me. What does that look like? Making you feel guilty about the children, using children to relay messages, threatening to take the children, threatening to tell your ex-spouses or authorities that you're lesbian, gay, or bisexual, or trans so that they will take the children away. I see this so often in my practice, and it's very unfortunate to see children caught up in this process because sometimes the parents, especially the abusive parents, neglect the feelings of the children as they do the things that I just mentioned, using them to relay messages especially. The next one here is using privilege. What does that look like? Treating you like a servant is the first example. Making all the big decisions. Being the one to define each partner's roles or duties in the relationship. Using privilege or ability to pass to discredit you, to put you in danger, or using their privilege to cut you off from resources. And finally, we land on using economic abuse. And economic abuse is probably the biggest one for me in terms of what I've seen in practice. And what does that look like? Preventing you from getting or keeping a job, making you ask for money, interfering with work or education, using your credit cards without permission, not working and requiring you to provide support, and keeping your name off joint assets. Financial independence and literacy is huge for those who are experiencing domestic violence, as most, if not all of them, will have run into this issue of suddenly needing financial independence. Some other things I've seen in practice is someone's identity being sabotaged due to misuse of their social security number. Perhaps they used to have a bank account, but that was closed because of misuse by their abuser. If this is your situation, I want to say that there are plenty of really good resources online that you can look towards to help you map your first step in getting back in control of your finances. But you're also not alone in this. If you need help, if you need some more information, feel free to use some of the resources that I'm going to link in the bio, but also your own intuition and your own drive to really get things back going the way that you want it to go. So next step, how do you use this information? If you are a friend or an ally, and I may have said this in the first video, what you don't want to do is start running towards your friend or family who you think have experienced things like this and start yelling, "You're abused! You're abused! Get out! You're being abused!" The whole point of this video is to show that power is really at the center of why this abusive relationship even exists. So the last thing you want to do is to take more power away from your friend or loved one. You want to bring power to them. And the best way to do that is to, one, respect all of their decisions on how they want to proceed in recovering, but also remaining in their life as a support person or a support group even. This is so essential to recovery for someone who is experiencing violence at home. Isolation is the last thing they need. So hang in there. I know sometimes it can be frustrating and it's hard to see people you love suffering, but it is so essential to be there for them and continue to be supportive to them. If you are going through it now, I just want to assure you that things do get better. I want to encourage you to use the power within you to do everything you can to put some power back into your own hands. And I highly encourage everyone to use all the resources they can to get informed on their situation and their best next steps. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or if you just want to talk about what you've experienced. I am here for you. Before you come with any particular legal questions, I just want to remind you all that I am an attorney only licensed to practice in Massachusetts. So if you have legal questions about the state that you're in that's not Massachusetts, I highly suggest that you go and try to get a consultation from a lawyer, but I'm happy to help point you in the right direction if I can. Again, thank you guys so much for watching and supporting me so far. Black Lives Matter, Black Trans Lives Matter. Happy Juneteenth to everybody out there who is Black. And just to stay safe, if you're protesting out there, thank you so much. I appreciate everything that you do, especially if you're risking your safety and your freedom to do so. And just be good out there. Be good to each other. And let's keep fighting until we see the changes in our society that we require. Take care now.